येते का आता सुरू करतो. So we are repeating once again the Kepler's law. The first law, again see page number 3 from your book. Open the books, see page number 3 from your book. So what is first Kepler's law? That is the orbit of planet is an ellipse and with the sun at one of the foci. So what is Kepler's first law? The orbit of a planet is an ellipse with the sun at one of the foci. So we have seen last time the what is ellipse. Whenever we have the cut section of a cone in an inclined plane, then whichever figure formed is an ellipse that they have shown in your pink rectangle. Then here in the figure they have shown sun with a yellow sphere while planet in a blue form, blue color. So that is the first law that time we have seen last time. Second law is here the line joining the planet and the sun sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of times. So here if A, see the figure, always see the figure 1.4 figure. If A is the initial, A and C are the initial positions of the planet, then the line SA and line CS, it sweeps equal areas in equal intervals of time. That means area SAB is equal to area CSD. So that is the second law. Then third law you remember as a formula, and then you can remember the statement easily. That is T square, capital T square proportional to small r cube. Capital T square is proportional to small r cube, where capital T is the period of revolution and small r is the distance between the planet and the sun. So how you can write it in statement? T square proportional r cube means square of the period of revolution around the sun is directly proportional to the cube of the mean distance of the planet from the sun. So that is the third law. T square proportional r cube, that is T square upon r cube is equal to constant. So these are the three laws which are very important laws, and but Kepler is not able to give the explanation why these planets they obey these laws. Then we are going to see page number 4. Here we have already solved the question, use your brain power, but once again I will repeat. If area ESF, so again come to the figure. If area ESF is equal to area ASB, what is your conclusion regarding EF and AB? That is the question. So here, as EF is lesser than AB, the speed of planet while traveling from E to F must be lesser than when it is traveling from A to B. That is, here the speed is not remaining constant. That is your conclusion. That is, in optical orbit the speed of the planet will not remain constant. So that is your conclusion. Now we are going to see the next law, that is Newton's law of gravitation. So it is very easy. According to this law, every object in the universe is attracted by every other object with a force which is directly proportional to the product of masses and inversely proportional to the square of distance between them. Once again I will repeat, every object in the universe attracts every other object with a force which is directly proportional to the product of masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So if we consider this force as capital F, then we have F proportional M1, M2. If we have two objects which are shown in your book, spherical objects having masses M1 and M2, and they are exerting force F on each other, and they are at a distance of d from each other, then f is proportional m1 m2 and f is inversely proportional to square of the distance, that is f inversely proportional to d square. If we combine these two, f proportional m1 m2 upon d square, followed. So if we want to convert this proportionality sign into is equal to sign, that will give you f is equal to, we are going to take constant of proportionality always, and that is taken by Newton as capital G, which is known as universal constant, because in whole universe the value of G remains constant, it will not change anywhere. So f is equal to G m1 m2 upon d square. So that is very important equation. F is equal to G m1 m2 upon d square. Now here if we make the change, that is if we make the mass of any one of the object double, then what will be the effect on force? The force will also doubles, because here force is directly proportional to the masses, product of masses, and therefore here when m1 or m2, any one of the two masses is double, then this force will also doubles. But what will happen if we have the distance, if we make double, as this, for this distance force is inversely proportional to the square of distance, and square of 2 is 4, force will get reduced by the factor 4, or it will become 1/4. Followed? So these are the changes which can be made by changing the masses or changing the distance between them. Now after that we are going to see, that is how the distance is taken, from where the distance to be measured. If we have spherical bodies, the distance will be the distance between the centers of the circular objects. If the objects are spherical or the two bodies are spherical, then the direction of force will be along the line joining the centers of the objects. Followed? And the distance is taken to be d. That is the case in case of spherical object. What I am telling, whenever the objects are spherical, then the direction of force is acting along the line joining their center of the two circular or spherical objects, and that distance between them is considered to be d. But if the objects are non-spherical or if they are irregular, then this direction of force is acting along the line of their line joining their center of masses. So once again I will repeat, whenever the objects are spherical, the direction of the force acting is along the line joining their centers, and if the objects are not spherical, they are irregular, then the direction of force acting will be along the direction of their line joining their center of masses. So here two different words they have given in your book. One is centers of mass and second is join their centers. So for spherical object we can immediately have the center, but when the objects are not spherical, what is center of mass, that they have given in the blue rectangle on page number 5. So that blue rectangle you see on page number 5 at the top. So what is the center of mass? Center of mass is the point inside or outside the object at which the total mass of the object is assumed to be concentrated. So that is the definition of center of mass. And if the object is spherical having uniform density, the center of mass will be the geometrical center. But if the object is not spherical having uniform density, the center of mass will be the centroid. So centroid means it is the point of intersection of the medians, that you know. So that is how we are going to consider the concept of center of mass, but it is only applicable for the objects which are non-spherical or which are irregular in shape. Now again we will come to this equation, F is equal to capital G m1 m2 upon d square. So if we have G, then what will be G? I will write on this side. So G will be F into d square upon m1 m2. Now from this you can find out the unit of G, which they have asked as a use your brain power. The SI unit of force, you know, Newton. Then distance is measured in SI unit in meters, but here d square will be there, so it will be Newton meter square upon m1 m2. Masses are measured in kilogram, so again kilogram will come twice, so it will become kilogram square. So here the unit, SI unit of G is Newton meter square per kilogram square, or you may write Newton meter square kilogram raised to minus 2. You may write like this, Newton meter square upon kilogram square, or you may write Newton meter square into kilogram raised to minus 2, that is per kilogram square in another form. The value of G is always constant everywhere in the universe, and that value they have given in your book, which is 6.673 into 10 raised to minus 11. Remember, because this value we are going to use while solving the problems. Then they have given one more definition about G. So here we have G is equal to Fd square upon m1 m2. So when this distance between the two objects is 1 unit, and when the masses are also 1 kg or in 1 unit, then the force exerted will be the gravitational force, capital G, which is a universal force. So you mark the definition which are given at the bottom of page number 4. Mark these definitions. So it can be seen that the value of G is the gravitational force. What will be the value of G? It is the gravitational force acting between two unit masses. If masses are unit, 1 meter, 1 centimeter, 1 kilo, masses are 1 gram, 1 kilogram, whatever it may be, but it is in 1 unit, kept at a distance, unit distance, that is 1 meter, 1 centimeter, then away from each other, then that gravitational force is known as the value of G. So how, now mark this definition. Thus in SI units the value of G is equal to the gravitational force between two masses of 1 kg kept 1 meter apart. Followed? So when force is 1 Newton, then distance 1 unit, masses also 1 unit, then whatever will be the gravitational constant is the unit gravitational constant. That is how you are going to define it. So you mark these two definitions. Now we are going to see how to prove, or how Newton has proved the force exerted is inversely proportional to the square of distance, and therefore it is also known as inverse distance square law. So law of gravitation of inverse square distance. So here for this he was helped by Kepler's third law, which is T square proportional R cube. So now we are going to prove Newton's law of gravitation, or Newton's inverse square law of gravitation, in which we have considered force inversely proportional to the square of the distance. So how Newton has proved this? How he has proved using Kepler's third law, that we are going to see now. It is some mathematical part. For that we are going to consider again the terms which we have previously seen, that is the uniform circular motion and the magnitude of centripetal force. That is definition of centripetal force we are also going to see. So what is uniform circular motion? When the object is moving in a circular path with a constant speed, it is known as uniform circular motion. Now this motion for the object is possible because it is possible when the object is constantly exerting or constantly acted upon by the force towards the center. So why this motion of object is possible? This motion of object in a circular path is possible because this object is constantly acted upon by the force which is directed towards the center of the circle, and thus it is known as the centripetal force or center seeking force. And the value of this center seeking force or centripetal force is given by F is equal to mv square upon r. So you have to remember this, F is equal to mv square upon r. So where F is the centripetal force, m is the mass of the object, v is the speed of the object, and r is the radius of the radius of the circle. Followed? So r is the radius of circle, because we have yesterday seen whenever the circular motion is there, the force is always directed towards the center, and this force is only responsible for the motion of the object. That is the reason, and this is what we are saying, that it is a centripetal force or center seeking force. Followed? So the value of this force is given by the equation mv square upon r, where m is the mass of object, v is the speed of the object, and r is the radius of the circle. Followed? Now the same formula we are going to use for the motion of the planet, because we are also going to consider the motion of planet around the sun as a uniform circular motion. So here in case of planet, here again we are going to use the formula for centripetal force, because motion of planet is also possible due to this centripetal force exerted by or exerted on the planet by the sun at its center. So in this formula for the planet, m will be the mass of planet, v will be the speed of planet, and r will be the distance of planet from the sun. If we apply the same formula for centripetal force, whenever the planet is moving around the sun, then the m will represent what? M will represent the mass of planet. What v will represent? V will represent the speed of planet. And what r will represent? R will represent the distance between the planet and the sun. Followed? So here we have the v, that is usual formula, v or velocity is equal to distance travelled upon time taken. So here distance travelled means it is the perimeter of the circle. Distance travelled by the planet around the sun means it is the perimeter of the circle. So perimeter of circle means circumference, it is 2 pi r, and time taken will be capital T. Time taken will be capital T, which is the time taken for one revolution by the planet around the sun. Followed? So that is capital T. Capital T is the time taken by the planet for its revolution around the sun. Followed? So if we put, suppose this is equation 2 and this is our equation 1. If we put the value of v in equation 1, put value of v in equation 1, what we will get? F is equal to m, v means 2 pi r upon t square upon r. Followed? We have put up the value of v in equation 1. V square will be 2 pi r upon t bracket square. Now I will open the bracket. M into 4 pi square r square upon t square, and this r will go up, so that will become r upon 1 will become 1 upon r. Followed up to this, I have taken divided by r means multiplied by 1 upon r. Followed? Now this r will get cancelled. So now we have 4 m pi square r upon t square. Followed? Now here we are proving, what we are proving? We are proving that force, gravitational force is inversely proportional to the square of distance. And by using what we are proving this? we are proving this using Kepler's third law, that is T square proportional R cube, that we are going to use. That is T square upon R cube is equal to constant. Using this, we are going to prove force is inversely proportional to the distance square. Followed? Now in this, we are going to multiply this equation, numerator and denominator, by R square. Why we are multiplying? Because here we are already having R and we want R cube, because in our Kepler's third law we have the term R cube. So we multiply at this step both the terms, numerator and denominator, by R square. You have to remember this step. For getting R cube only we are doing this. So what we have now? F is equal to 4m pi square R cube upon T square R square. Got? 4m pi square R cube upon T square R square. Now from this we are going to separate R cube upon T square. This term we are going to separate. So why? Because this is the term or ratio we are getting in the Kepler's law, R cube upon T square. That's why I have separated. Our law gives us T square upon R cube is equal to K. So what will be R cube upon T square? That will give you 1 upon K. Followed? So here we are getting 1 upon K. So F is equal to 4m pi square upon R square into 1 upon K. Followed? Since T square upon R cube is equal to K according to Kepler's. Followed? So we have F is equal to 4m pi square upon K into 1 upon R square. Now this whole term is constant. I have taken K on this side and R square on this side. F is equal to 4m pi square upon K into 1 upon R square. 4 is constant, mass of planet will be whatever it may be, it will be constant, pi is constant, K is constant. So this is total constant term. So force is inversely proportional to the square of distance. So that is how Newton has come to the conclusion that gravitational force is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the planet and the sun. So Newton identified this force which is known as force of gravity, and though this, if we consider the strength of the force, gravitational force is the weakest force, but it controls the universe and decides the future. So that is how you are going to prove the Newton's inverse square gravitational law using Kepler's law. काय झाले कोण आठवते आता बघूया आता.